It's great that you found a moment to talk to Perfect Diver. How did you start diving?
When I first met my wife Nicola, she was already a keen diver, and really I got into it through her passion for diving. She had recently worked, in fact when we met, she'd just come back from working on a dive boat in the Red Sea, and at the time we met she was working on a dive boat working out of Brighton Marina in the UK. And we met on the boat and kept in touch and eventually started dating. One of our very early travels, because we both love to travel, and we've tried always through our lives to make time and try and put the money aside to have some adventure. So one of our very first trips, I think maybe even our first trip when we first met, was to Thailand in 1984, which was an amazing place for many reasons, and we retain a love affair with Thailand, particularly the islands in southern Thailand. But on that first occasion, I was content, I was happy to snorkel, and Nicola went scuba diving, and in the end I kind of got jealous of what she could do, and went back to Phuket, did my paddy, and then the last month we were there, we spent in and around Koh Hai using boats to get to all the different dives that were around there, and really just recommended by the boys who ran the boats. They knew where the reefs were diveable, where there was spectacular coral and sea life. But I think we were blessed to see Thailand in the early 80s.
Do you have any favorite diving spots? What places do you like to dive? Maybe you have some special places that you remember?
Well, as I've said, we're keen travellers, mostly by boat. We have our own sailboat in Greece, in the Greek islands, in northwest Greece, which we keep on an island called Ithaki. And we've had that in the Mediterranean since the mid-80s. So we go there every summer, and we sail and we travel, the three of us, with my wife, my daughter and I, and it's a very bonding experience. It's kind of back to nature, really. We're not the kind of sailors who spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on sails to race. We like to use the boat as a way to get around places that we couldn't by car. In Greece we do a lot of snorkeling. We sometimes dive. Obviously there are not the colours, the spectacular colours in Greece that you get in tropical waters, but the rock formations and the very special light that there is in Greece, which is, I can best describe really as a kind of, it's like a blue light above water, but it penetrates the water, and everything has the most extraordinarily artistic look underwater. In the island, the best islands in our area for diving are probably Castus and Ithaca. But again, you need to get into the very quiet spots where there isn't much boat traffic, because these days in the Mediterranean, that's the issue, is that some places are just so busy with boats that there isn't much to see. I think the light makes Greece particularly special, even underwater, and especially underwater in some ways. I think the colours are really extraordinary. And there are lots of small fish and some very interesting rock formations and geology. So that kind of makes it worthwhile. But having said that, I think our favourite places are probably Indian Ocean. The Maldives are great. Thailand, which we know particularly well, the reason we know Thailand, the waters in Thailand so well, is that every winter we hire a boat, a catamaran, which incidentally, I think a sailing catamaran is probably the world's greatest dive boat, because it's so shallow. You can get over the reef and anchor close to it or anchor inside for a day or two and explore not only the reef but the tiny little islands that are offshore. We take the dinghy, sometimes with snorkels, sometimes with gear, and we can always find interesting places and interesting things to see. It's Thailand, that part of Thailand, I think, is characterised by those big limestone cliffs and the lots of small, hundreds of them, dotted around in that part of the Gulf. And so it's very easy to find places that are kind of off the beaten track. And I think that's the most exciting thing about diving for us when we're boating, is that we never know what's around the corner. And it's always the unexpected places that are the biggest thrill. And of course, with a reef of sorts and invariably coral and a lot of fish, though the base of those sort of cliffs and the edges where it goes to beach, the edges there where it's shallower, there are too many good places to actually put in a book. And I have a special place in my heart for Koh Dok Mai, because that was my first real dive with scuba gear. And although I'd done a lot of snorkeling, and I still do a lot of snorkeling, and we all snorkel a lot, because as Katie was growing up, my daughter was growing up, it was the best way for her to learn to be in the water and to be comfortable. One of my other great favourite spots is Koh Bon in Thailand, which is also very close to Phuket. But there's a reef there that you can just drift over for maybe 30-40 minutes, and at either end it's accessed from the beach, so it's an incredibly safe and relaxing dive. Once when I was there, staying in a hotel close by, and we met an American guy who's become a very good friend of mine, I won't mention his name, who'd spent a lot of money diving on that trip. He'd been there for a couple of weeks and had another week left, and we met him, and he said, oh, you've got to come with me on, I've booked the boat, I'm going out. He was going all sorts of places, all the good spots. And we went with him one day, I can't remember where, and it was great. And the next day we had booked a special day sala, like a little hut on the beach at the hotel, which was on this island about 2 miles from the hotel. And they took us over there by boat, and my friend, my American friend, came with us. And I said, look, you're not, he wanted to come because he'd made friends with us, but he also knew that he was missing a day's diving. And I said, let's paddle out, let's swim out, and with just snorkels, and have a look at the reef. It's quite good. And I eventually got him to do this. He was a bit grumpy about it. And half an hour later, we got out at the other end of the beach, and he said, man, I've wasted so much money. That is as good as anything that I've been taken to in the last 2 weeks. And like I say, he'd spent a lot of money making sure that he got to all the good places. So like I say, there are great, well-known places in Thailand to dive, but there are also hundreds of great places that are not as well known.
Red Box is a band from UK. Do you like diving in warm waters only, or also in cold waters?
Simple answer to this, warm only. I was brought up in the north of England on the North Sea, which is pretty wild and very cold. And it didn't stop us as children and teenagers playing in the water and with the water and on the water in all manner of boats and inflatable items. So I suppose I got to the point when I was in my 20s where I'd sailed in the Mediterranean a few times, and I thought, you know what, if I ever earn any money and I could buy myself a little sailing boat, I would bring it here, because it's constantly shorts, you don't need any, that's it.
Do you dive in wetsuit or dry suit?
When we pack to go to the boat, it's a small bag, and I love that. And so I've tended to dive in warm waters. I've never dived in a dry suit. I've dived in a wetsuit occasionally, but I do miss the feeling of being totally immersed in the water. I love the feel of the water, just, you know, on my body. So that would be my preferred method. So not naked, obviously.
Do you dive when the opportunity arises, or do you plan a diving holiday every year?
You know, we sail and dive in Greece every summer, and when we can afford it, we hire a catamaran, the same one each year, and we go to normally southern Thailand, but we've also done it in the Caribbean, and once in Florida, which I didn't like.
You have a yacht and a diving family. How many people in your family dive?
We all three of us dive.
Do you have diving equipment on the board of your yacht?
We do have dive gear on the boat, and I use the gear mainly to do maintenance under the boat if there's anything. And the reason we didn't originally have any dive gear on the boat, but Nicola and I sailed from the very northern end of Corfu down to a place called Pylos, which is on the Peloponnese of Greece, and we went through the night. There was no wind, so we had the engine on. We were motoring the boat, and we got caught up in a fishing net. There were two fishing boats unlit, so we couldn't see them, and we had to dive down with a torch shone from above the water, and cut off with a face mask and snorkel, and cut the net off the propeller of the boat, and it took over an hour to do it in the dark, out at sea, no land. And that made me think, you know what, underwater head torch and some dive gear. And ever since we've had the dive gear, and we probably dive 3 or 4 times in the summer, but mainly for sorting things out under the boat. And also occasionally I use it to make sure that the anchor is set, is secure.
Do you dive only in the company of family, friends, or join groups in diving centers?
Basically, we've never dived. I think Nicola was a member of a dive club for a while. We're not members of a dive club, but we dive every summer and winter.
What is your attitude towards the actions of people fighting for clean oceans, elimination of plastic pollution of seawaters, or fighting for the ban on killing cetaceans, whales, for tradition?
Well, I'm against anything that's killing for tradition. That just seems to be a really poor reason to kill. So that's the first thing. I think secondly, this is something close to my heart. I think wherever humans go, we have a negative impact on the environment, and we need to stop being the problem and become the solution. And that it means action and now. And I think the debate always seems to become political and or economic, and it's an apolitical matter. It's so important. And as for the economics of it, well, if we destroy our planet, what are the economics of that? So I don't really have much time for the politicians on this, and I think we the people are ultimately responsible for what happens in the next 10 years, and it's a vital 10 years. So I have the greatest respect for people fighting that cause, and I'd say really all other issues facing humans are relatively insignificant to that one.
Does your diving experience inspire you somehow musically? Do they influence your creativity?
I don't think that I've ever specifically thought, diving is in some ways a bit like flying. You always feel there should be music in the background. There's something inherently graceful about it. I think what I would say more than me ever writing anything specific to diving is that diving is one of the best ways of relaxing for me in warm, safe waters, preferably drifting on a current. And I don't mind swimming back, but I think that those moments are perfect. And to be in that relaxed state is really good for your creativity. It's amazing that if you can let everything go, when you come back to musical problems, creative problems, whatever they may be, I think you have a renewed vigour about it and maybe a different angle. So I think it's a very important part of the process and everything that we do to relax, and diving is one of the things that we do. The other thing is that it's interesting, to me anyway, how many of my better ideas I have away from the studio. Although I may work things out in the studio, normally the actual the pillars of the building of my idea, I find those when I'm out and about. And I think the motion of moving and moving forward, it's an idea that I kind of named an album after, our second album, which is called Motive. And I had in mind that feeling of when you're moving through and progressing. So I like that feeling, and I like that feeling of there's something that I don't know around the next corner. And I think sailing works well for that, and diving works well for that too. I think the Red Box song that most captures this feeling is probably Chase the Setting Sun, which is on our most recent album. I think that quest for keeping the moment going, and the idea of pointing a boat towards the setting sun, or driving towards the setting sun, or flying in a plane, and keeping that moment alive for just a second longer. That feeling and yearning for tomorrow, where you'll do the same again. I think probably diving is just part of our lifestyle, or the lifestyle we would like if we were rich. And what we do is we try and save up money and then live that dream while we can. Life is short.
Can you send me? Take the evening train, right there to ride it back again. Tell the story how you want to be.